Armin was a man who lived a life of luxury, but he carried no warmth in his heart. He was the youngest billionaire CEO in the city, admired for his sharp mind but feared for his cold nature. People in his company whispered stories about him. Some said he never smiled, others said he never trusted anyone, and many believed he only cared about money. To most, Armin was a machine in the shape of a man, powerful, distant, and unreachable. That evening, the sky was heavy with dark clouds, and the wind rushed through the tall buildings. The city streets were quieter than usual as the night grew colder. Armin finished his long meeting and walked out of his tall glass office building. His expensive black coat brushed against his legs as he carried his briefcase filled with important files. For him, it was just another late night in his busy life. But fate had something different planned. As he walked toward his car parked near the corner of the street, 3 men appeared from the shadows. Their clothes were rough, and their faces were covered with anger and greed. One of them stepped forward and blocked Armin's way. "Hand it over," the man said in a low but threatening voice, pointing at the briefcase. Armin's brows furrowed. He was not a man who gave in easily, whether in boardrooms or in back alleys. "Step aside," he said firmly, his voice cold and sharp. But the men had no intention of listening. Another one grabbed Armin's arm roughly, while the third reached for the briefcase. Armin struggled, but there were too many of them. For the first time in many years, he felt helpless. Just then, from a narrow street nearby, a girl appeared. She was carrying a small bag of groceries and looked tired from a long day of work. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn out, and her face carried the mark of hardship. Yet her eyes were alive with quiet strength. Her name was Mira. Mira noticed the scene at once. She saw the rich man being surrounded by 3 robbers. For a moment, fear froze her feet. She was poor, she had nothing to give, and she was already burdened with caring for her sick mother at home. But her heart did not allow her to stay silent. She quickly looked around and found a wooden stick lying near a pile of boxes. Without thinking twice, she picked it up and ran toward the group. "Leave him alone," she shouted, her voice trembling but filled with courage. The robbers turned to her and laughed. "Stay out of this, girl," one of them barked. "This is none of your business." But Mira didn't stop. She tightened her grip on the stick and swung it with all her strength. The stick struck one of the robbers on his arm, and he cried out in pain. The briefcase slipped from his hand, giving Armin a chance to pull it back quickly. The robbers grew angry, their eyes flashing with fury. One of them stepped toward Mira, but just then, the noise had already drawn attention. Lights turned on in nearby houses, and voices could be heard from windows. Some people peeked out, asking what was happening. The robbers looked at each other, cursed under their breath, and decided it was too risky to stay. Within seconds, they ran off into the darkness, leaving Armin and Mira behind. For a moment, silence filled the street. Armin stood there, his breath heavy, his heart still racing. He looked at Mira with surprise. This young girl, who had nothing, had just risked herself to save him. Mira dropped the stick, her hands shaking. She took a deep breath and asked softly, "Are you all right?" Armin, who had built walls around his heart for years, felt something unusual. Her voice was gentle, her eyes worried not about herself but about him. Nobody had spoken to him like that in a very long time. He tried to find words, but for the first time, silence seemed easier. Mira gave a small nod when he didn't reply. She adjusted the bag of groceries in her arm and turned to leave. For her, it was simple: someone needed help, and she had stepped in. She didn't expect thanks, nor did she think about who the man was. But Armin remained standing there, watching her walk away under the dim streetlights. His usual coldness could not hide the strange warmth he felt in his chest. That moment, though short, had left a mark on him. He was not used to kindness, and certainly not from a stranger who had nothing to gain. As he finally got into his car, Armin realized something he had never thought about before: money and power had always protected him, but tonight, it was the bravery of a poor girl that saved him. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story. But deep inside, Armin felt that this was not the last time he would see her. That night, under the cold sky, a new chapter of his life silently began, one that would change him forever. The night after the incident, Armin sat in his quiet, luxurious apartment. The large glass windows overlooked the glowing city, but his eyes were not focused on the lights. His mind kept replaying the scene: the poor girl with tired eyes, holding a stick, standing between him and danger. He had faced countless challenges in his business life. He had defeated strong competitors and survived major financial storms. But that night, something small, something unexpected, had shaken him deeply. It wasn't the robbery attempt, it was Mira. Armin leaned back in his leather chair. He rarely thought about strangers, yet he could not forget the courage of that girl. Why did she do it? He asked himself quietly. She didn't know him, she didn't owe him anything, and yet she had risked herself. For someone like Armin, who had always believed that kindness was rare, this was hard to understand. The next morning, he went to his company as usual. His employees greeted him carefully, their voices filled with respect but also fear. Armin's reputation as a cold CEO followed him everywhere. He gave sharp instructions in the meeting room, signed documents, and discussed projects. But in between, his mind drifted back to that alley and the girl who had stood up for him. Meanwhile, Mira's life continued in its usual struggle. She lived in a small, old house on the edge of the city with her mother, who was sick and bedridden. Every day, Mira worked long hours at a small cafe, earning just enough to buy medicines and food. When she came home that morning after saving Armin, her mother noticed her tired face. "Mira, you look pale. Did something happen?" her mother asked gently. Mira smiled faintly and shook her head. "Nothing, Amma. Just a long night." She didn't tell her mother about the robbery incident. She didn't want to worry her. For Mira, the event was over. She had done what was right, and that was enough. But fate had other plans. 2 days later, Armin returned to the same office building late in the evening. This time, his car was parked at a different spot. As he was about to leave, he saw a familiar figure walking down the street with a bag of groceries. It was her. Armin's steps slowed. He was not used to approaching strangers, but something inside pushed him forward. "Excuse me," he called out. Mira stopped and turned. She looked surprised to see him. You are all right," she said softly. Her voice carried relief, as if she had worried about his safety. "Yes," Armin replied. For a moment, he didn't know what else to say. He had led boardroom battles with thousands of words, but now even a simple thank you felt difficult. Finally, he said, "You helped me that night. I owe you." Mira shook her head quickly. "No, you don't owe me anything. I only did what anyone should do." Armin looked at her, his sharp eyes studying her face. There was no sign of greed, no hidden expectation. She spoke with honesty, and that honesty touched him. Most people in his life wanted something from him: money, position, or favor. But this girl wanted nothing. Still, Armin could not leave it at that. "At least let me know your name," he said. "Mira," she replied simply. The name settled in Armin's heart like a soft echo. For the first time in years, he remembered a name not for business, not for partnership, but for something deeper because it mattered. That evening, Armin returned to his apartment, but his thoughts were no longer cold. He thought of Mira's quiet strength, her calm refusal to accept anything in return. She had stood against fear with nothing but courage, and that image kept returning to him. The following week, Armin found himself driving past the street where he had first met her. He wasn't sure why, perhaps curiosity, perhaps something more. And one day, he saw her again, working in a small cafe. She wore a simple apron and moved quickly between tables, serving tea and cleaning dishes. Her tiredness was clear, yet she smiled politely at customers. Armin watched quietly from outside. Something in his chest felt heavy. For a man who had everything, it was strange to see someone who had so little yet carried so much dignity. That night, as he lay in bed, Armin realized something unusual: the memory of Mira would not fade. He wanted to know more about her life. He wanted to understand the strength that lived in her heart despite her hardships. For the first time in many years, Armin's cold world had been touched by warmth. He didn't yet know what this feeling meant, but he knew one thing: his life was already changing, and it had started with a poor girl's courage on a dark night. The following days moved slowly for Armin. His work was the same: endless meetings, important decisions, and people rushing to please him. Yet, behind his serious face, his thoughts kept drifting back to Mira. He remembered her steady voice, her brave stand, and her refusal to accept any reward. He had met thousands of people in his life: investors, businessmen, politicians, and workers. But none had left a mark on his heart like she had. Armin had built his world on logic and control, but something about Mira made him restless. One evening, after finishing work earlier than usual, Armin told his driver to stop near the small cafe where Mira worked. He stepped out quietly and walked in. The place was nothing compared to the luxury restaurants he was used to. The chairs were old, the tables scratched, and the air carried the smell of tea and fried snacks. Yet, it felt warm, alive, and simple. Mira was behind the counter, cleaning cups. She didn't notice him at first. When she finally turned, her eyes widened in surprise. "You?" she asked softly, almost dropping the cup in her hand. Armin gave a small nod. "Yes. I thought I would come here." Mira quickly placed the cup aside. She looked around nervously. "This is just a small cafe. People like you don't usually come here." Armin ignored the curious glances from other customers. He walked to a corner table and sat down. "Maybe it's time I try something different," he said calmly. Though she still looked surprised, Mira approached him. "What would you like to order?" she asked politely, trying to keep her voice steady. Armin glanced at the simple menu on the wall. "Tea," he said. Soon, she brought him a steaming cup of tea. Armin took a sip. It wasn't the finest blend, nothing like what he drank in his office or at his home. But strangely, it felt refreshing. He looked at Mira as she moved between tables, serving customers with patience. Her life was full of struggles, yet she carried herself with dignity. For a man who had always thought money was the only power, this was something new to witness. After she finished serving others, Mira walked back to him. "Why did you come here?" she asked honestly. Armin put the cup down. He had never been asked such a direct question. People usually tried to impress him, but she was different. "Because I wanted to thank you again," he said. "That night, you could have walked away. But you didn't." Mira shook her head gently. "Anyone would have done the same." Armin leaned forward. "No. Not everyone would risk themselves for a stranger." His voice softened. "You did." Mira looked away, unsure how to respond. She didn't want praise. For her, it had been a simple choice between right and wrong. But she could feel his sincerity, and that made her quiet. Armin noticed her silence. He respected it. He didn't push further. Instead, he asked, "Do you always work here?" "Yes," Mira replied. "It helps me manage things at home." She didn't explain more, but Armin could sense there was a story behind her tired eyes. That night, After leaving the cafe, Armin's thoughts stayed with her again. He had always lived in a world of tall buildings and endless riches. But Mira's small world, her honesty, her hard work, her quiet strength felt more powerful than all the wealth he owned. In the days that followed, Armin began visiting the cafe more often. At first, Mira found it strange. A billionaire CEO sitting in a corner, drinking simple tea, watching life in a modest place, it was something no one expected. People started whispering, wondering why such a rich man kept coming back. But Armin didn't care about whispers. He came because he wanted to. He never asked for special treatment, never showed his power. He just sat, watched, and sometimes spoke with Mira when she had a free moment. Slowly, their conversations grew longer. They talked about simple things: the weather, the city, the taste of food. For Armin, it was new to talk without hidden motives. For Mira, it was strange to see someone so powerful speak with such patience. One evening, as the cafe was closing, Armin finally asked, "Mira, why do you work so hard every day?" Mira hesitated. She usually kept her struggles hidden. But something about his voice made her answer. "Because my mother is sick," she said softly. "She cannot work, so I do everything. I want her to be comfortable, even if life is hard for me." Armin felt something stir in his heart. He had seen many people fight for wealth, but here was someone fighting only for love and responsibility. It touched him deeply. That night, as he drove home, Armin realized that his world and Mira's world were very different. One was built on money, the other on sacrifice. Yet somehow, their paths had crossed. And deep inside, Armin knew he didn't want this connection to end. Armin's visits to the small cafe soon became a quiet routine. At first, people whispered about it, some even laughed at the sight of a billionaire sitting among workers and students, drinking simple tea. But Armin didn't care. Each visit was not about the tea, nor the cafe, it was about Mira. She still treated him like an ordinary customer. She didn't ask about his wealth, didn't flatter him, and didn't behave as others usually did around him. For Armin, who had lived in a world full of fake smiles, her honesty felt like a breath of fresh air. One evening, after the cafe closed, Armin stayed a little longer. He waited until Mira finished cleaning the tables and locking the shelves. As she walked out, carrying her small bag of groceries, he followed her quietly. "Mira," he called out. She turned, surprised. "You're still here?" "Yes," Armin said. "Let me walk with you." She hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. The street was dark, and though she was used to walking alone, there was something reassuring in his presence. As they walked side by side, Armin asked softly, "How is your mother?" Mira was silent for a moment. She wasn't used to sharing her personal life. Finally, she replied, "She's weak, but I do my best to take care of her." "Do you have help?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I cannot afford it. But she has me, and that is enough." Her words made Armin glance at her. She carried her burden with such strength, yet she didn't complain. He thought of all the people he knew who had money, comfort, and everything they wanted, yet still complained about life. Mira, who had so little, carried her pain with quiet dignity. When they reached her small house, she stopped. It was old, with cracked walls and a dim light inside. She turned to him and said gently, "Thank you for walking with me. But I think you should go now." Armin looked at the little house, then at her. He wanted to ask if she needed help, but he stopped. He could see in her eyes that she wasn't ready to accept it. So, he simply said, "Take care of yourself and your mother." She gave a small smile and went inside. The next day, Armin sat in his office, but his mind was elsewhere. He wanted to do something for Mira, something that would ease her struggles. But he also knew she was proud and would never accept charity. Still, his heart wouldn't let him stay quiet. That evening, he made a decision. He called one of his trusted assistants and asked about the best doctors in the city. Without mentioning Mira's name, he arranged for medical support in her area. A few days later, Mira returned home from the cafe to find a local doctor waiting at her doorstep. "Your mother has been registered for free treatment," the doctor explained kindly. "It is a new program in this area." Mira was shocked. She hadn't applied for any program. She looked at the doctor suspiciously. "Are you sure this is for us?" "Yes," the doctor assured her. "Please don't worry. It is covered. You just need to bring her to the clinic when needed." That night, as Mira sat by her mother's side, she thought about the sudden help. She suspected Armin, but she had no proof. Her heart felt torn. Part of her was thankful, but another part feared becoming dependent on someone else's kindness. Meanwhile, Armin visited the cafe again. As he sipped his tea, Mira walked over. She looked at him directly, her eyes searching his face. "Did you do something?" she asked suddenly. Armin looked at her calmly. "Why do you ask?" "Because a doctor came to our house," she said firmly. "He said my mother is registered for free treatment. I know such things don't happen without reason." Armin stayed silent for a moment. Then he said softly, "What matters is that your mother gets better. Nothing else." Mira's eyes softened, but her pride rose. "I don't want to feel like I owe you anything," she said quietly. Armin shook his head. "You don't owe me. You already gave me something no one else ever has." She frowned, confused. "What did I give you?" "Trust," he answered simply. "That night, when you stood between me and danger, you didn't think about who I was. You just acted with courage. Do you know how rare that is in this world?" Mira lowered her eyes, her heart caught between gratitude and fear. She didn't want to depend on him, yet his words touched something deep inside her. Armin didn't press further. He respected her silence. But inside, he knew he wasn't going to stop caring. He had lived in cold loneliness for years, and now, for the first time, someone had broken through those walls. That night, as Mira lay beside her mother, she thought of Armin's words. She had built walls around her heart to survive in a harsh world. But with every visit, with every quiet gesture, he was slowly breaking those walls. And though she tried to resist, a part of her wondered, was this man truly as cold as people said, or was there a warmth in him that only she had seen? Armin had always been known as a cold man, a leader who ruled with strict discipline and little emotion. But since meeting Mira, small changes began to appear in him. His employees noticed he wasn't as quick to lose patience in meetings. His voice, though still firm, carried less sharpness. Even his longtime assistant was surprised when Armin asked about the health of his staff one morning. But Armin himself didn't fully understand these changes. All he knew was that each evening, after the heavy weight of his business day, he found peace in the thought of Mira. Her courage, her honesty, her simple smile, they stayed with him. One Saturday afternoon, Armin visited the cafe again. It wasn't as busy as usual. Mira stood behind the counter, arranging cups. When she noticed him, her eyes widened slightly, but she gave a small nod. "You're here again," she said. "Maybe I like the tea here," Armin replied with the faintest smile. Mira raised her eyebrows. "Or maybe you just like troubling me with questions." Armin chuckled softly, surprising even himself. He hadn't laughed like that in years. After serving him tea, Mira joined him for a moment. The cafe was quiet, so she sat across the table. Armin looked at her closely. "Mira," he began, "do you ever think of yourself? You spend all your energy for your mother. Don't you want something for your own life?" Mira was silent for a while. Then she said softly, "Dreams are expensive. I don't have the luxury to think about myself. My mother needs me more than I need anything." Her words hit Armin's heart. He had money to buy anything he wished, yet here was a girl who gave up everything for someone else. He leaned forward. "But don't you think you deserve happiness too?" Mira smiled faintly. "Happiness is seeing my mother comfortable. That's enough for me." Armin wanted to argue, to tell her she deserved more, but he stayed quiet. He respected her strength, even if it broke his heart to see her sacrifice so much. Days passed, and Armin continued to visit the cafe. Slowly, the distance between him and Mira began to shrink. They talked more freely. Sometimes it was about small things: the weather, the taste of food, funny customers at the cafe. Other times, their talks grew deeper. Mira told him about her childhood, how her father had passed away when she was young, how her mother struggled alone, and how she learned to work hard early in life. Armin listened silently. He rarely shared his own life, but one evening, as they walked after the cafe closed, he spoke about his past. "My parents were always busy," he said quietly. "My father cared only about business, and my mother lived far away from me. I grew up surrounded by people, but I was always alone. Maybe that is why people call me cold." Mira looked at him with soft eyes. For the first time, she saw not the powerful CEO but a lonely man who had never known warmth. "You're not cold," she said gently. "You're just protecting yourself. But sometimes, protecting too much means you lose the chance to feel anything real." Her words stayed in his heart long after she walked into her small house that night. One day, Armin surprised Mira by visiting her home. He brought fruits and some medicines, but he held them casually, as if they were nothing. Mira frowned. "You didn't need to bring these." "I know," he said calmly. "But I wanted to." Her mother, lying on the bed, smiled warmly. "So, this is the man you mentioned?" she asked Mira softly. Mira blushed. "Amma," Armin stepped forward respectfully. "I just wanted to meet you and see how you are doing." Her mother studied him for a moment, then said, "You have kind eyes, even if you try to hide them." For the first time, Armin felt shy. He wasn't used to such simple, heartfelt words. That evening, as Armin left Mira's home, he realized something powerful. For years, he had lived in houses filled with expensive furniture, decorated walls, and silent rooms. But never had he felt the warmth he felt in that small, broken house. It wasn't the place, it was the people. Mira and her mother carried love that no wealth could buy. As he sat in his car, Armin finally admitted to himself what he had been avoiding: Mira had touched his heart. She had shown him kindness when he least expected it. She had broken through his coldness with her simple courage. And now, without realizing it, she had become the most important part of his life. But Armin also knew something else. Their worlds were very different. He was a man of power and riches. She was a poor girl fighting every day to survive. Would she ever accept his feelings, if he confessed them? Or would her pride and dignity keep her distant from him? These questions haunted him. Yet deep inside, Armin knew one truth: he could no longer imagine his life without her presence. And slowly, a decision began to grow in his heart: he would not let her struggle alone. He would stand by her, no matter how hard it might be. Armin had made up his mind. He could no longer stand by and watch Mira carry her burdens alone. The more time he spent with her, the more he understood how strong she was, but also how much she needed support, even if she never admitted it. One evening, as the cafe was closing, Armin walked in. The owner greeted him nervously, still unused to having such a powerful man in his small shop. Armin ordered his usual tea and waited until Mira had a moment free. When she finally walked over, wiping her hands on her apron, Armin spoke gently. "Mira, I have been thinking. Would you allow me to help with your mother's treatment? Not secretly this time, but openly. Mira froze. Her eyes darkened with hesitation. I already told you, I don't want to owe you anything. Armin shook his head. It's not about owing me. It's about making sure your mother gets the care she deserves. I have the resources. Why should she suffer when I can help? Mira sighed and looked away. You don't understand. People already talk. They say strange things about why you come here. If I accept your help, they will only talk more. I don't want my mother to feel ashamed. Armin leaned forward, his voice calm but steady. Let them talk. People will always talk. But your mother's health is more important than their words. Mira bit her lip. She wanted to refuse, yet deep inside she knew he was right. Still, her pride held her back. She had lived her whole life fighting alone. Accepting help felt like weakness. Finally, she said softly, I'll think about it. Armin didn't push further. He gave her a small nod, showing he respected her decision. The next week brought new challenges. News began to spread in the business world about Armin's frequent visits to a small cafe. Rumors filled the newspapers and online pages. Some claimed he was investing in the cafe, others whispered about a mysterious girl. Armin ignored it all. But Mira couldn't. Customers at the cafe began teasing her, some with harmless jokes, others with cruel remarks. The billionaire's favorite girl, one customer laughed. Another whispered, she's lucky, maybe she'll never have to work again. Mira's face burned with embarrassment. She hated attention, especially the wrong kind. That evening, when Armin arrived, she avoided his eyes. He noticed at once. What's wrong? He asked gently. Don't come here so often, she said quickly. Armin frowned. Why? Because people are talking, she admitted, her voice low. They say things about me, things that hurt. I don't want this kind of attention. For a moment, Armin stayed silent. He was a man used to ignoring gossip, but he understood her pain. She wasn't used to this world of judgment and rumors. I don't care what they say, he replied firmly. But I do, Mira whispered. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. My life is already hard. I don't want it to become harder because of me being seen with you. Armin felt a heavy ache in his chest. He wanted to protect her from everything, but he couldn't control the mouths of people. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at the city lights. For the first time, he felt powerless. Money could solve business problems, but it could not silence cruel words or protect someone's dignity. Yet one thing was clear: he could not step away from Mira. She had become too important to him. The next day, instead of going to the cafe, Armin waited outside Mira's house. When she returned from work, she was startled to see him there. Armin, what are you doing here? She asked quickly. I didn't want to disturb you at the cafe, he said softly. But I needed to see you. Mira sighed. You don't understand how complicated this is. I do, he replied. But Mira, listen to me. I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here because I care. Maybe I don't know the right way to show it, but I can't just disappear either. Mira looked at him, torn between fear and something warmer she couldn't name. His voice carried sincerity she couldn't ignore. Her mother, hearing the voices, called from inside. Who is it, Mira? Mira answered nervously, It's Armin. Her mother's gentle voice came again. Invite him in. Don't keep him standing outside. Mira hesitated, but finally opened the door wider. Armin stepped in quietly. Inside the small house, he sat near her mother's bed. He spoke kindly, asking about her health and comfort. Mira watched silently as her mother smiled at his gentle words. Later, when he left, her mother said softly to Mira, "That man carries a lonely heart. Don't push him away too quickly." Mira was stunned. Her mother rarely spoke so directly, but the words stayed with her. That night, Mira lay awake, thinking of everything: the gossip, her pride, Armin's sincerity, and her mother's quiet observation. Her heart was confused. She wanted to stay strong and independent, but she could no longer deny the truth: Armin was slowly becoming part of her world, no matter how much she tried to resist. And deep inside, a question began to rise, a question she had never dared to ask herself before: was she ready to let someone break through the walls she had built around her heart? The days had passed, and the quiet bond between Armin and Mira had grown stronger, even if neither had fully admitted it. Armin continued visiting the cafe and Mira's small house, not as a rich CEO flaunting his wealth, but as someone who genuinely cared. Mira had started to trust him, not fully, but enough to allow his presence in her life. One evening, after finishing her shift at the cafe, Mira returned home to find Armin waiting outside. This time, she didn't resist. She understood now that he had no intention of forcing anything, he simply wanted to be there. "I thought I should check on your mother," he said softly as they walked together. "She is resting," Mira replied, her voice calmer than before. "And I am tired too." Armin nodded, sensing her exhaustion. "You work too hard. You deserve rest." Mira hesitated, then spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have always believed I must handle everything myself. Letting someone help, it feels strange." Armin looked at her, his expression gentle. "Life is not meant to be carried alone. Some people come into our lives to share the burden, not take it away. I don't want to take anything from you, Mira. I only want to stand beside you." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she did not look away. She saw honesty, kindness, and a quiet warmth that she had never imagined existed in a man like Armin. Over the next few weeks, Armin's support became more visible, though never overwhelming. He arranged proper medical treatment for her mother and made sure the cafe was running smoothly, though he left all decisions to Mira. He never flaunted his wealth, never demanded attention, and never pressured her. He simply made her life a little lighter. Slowly, Mira began to let her guard down. She realized that accepting help did not mean losing dignity. Armin respected her boundaries, never asking more than she was willing to give. That respect, combined with his quiet understanding, began to change her heart. One rainy afternoon, as the streets glistened with wet reflections, Armin accompanied Mira and her mother to the clinic. They waited together in the small, crowded room. Mira noticed that he did not sit arrogantly or speak down to anyone. He was patient, polite, and surprisingly gentle with everyone around. Her mother smiled at him from across the room. "You have a good heart," she whispered. Armin's lips curved into a small smile. "It is easy to have a good heart when someone inspires it," he replied quietly, glancing at Mira. Mira felt warmth in her chest, something she had long denied herself. She looked at Armin differently now, not as a wealthy stranger, but as someone who had chosen to be part of her life with sincerity and care. That evening, after returning home, Mira finally spoke her truth. "Armin, I was afraid," she admitted. "I was afraid that if I let someone help me, I would lose control. I was afraid of depending on anyone. But you never forced me. You just stayed." Armin reached out and gently held her hand. "Mira, you are strong, braver than anyone I have ever met. I did not come to take control of your life. I came to be part of it, if you allow me." Tears welled up in Mira's eyes, not from sadness but from relief and understanding. She realized that life had given her a rare gift, someone who could stand beside her through struggles without trying to change her. Her mother, observing quietly, smiled knowingly. "Sometimes, life sends people we do not expect," she said softly. And sometimes, those people stay forever. From that day, Mira's life began to change, not because wealth replaced her struggles, but because she now had support, respect, and love in her life. Armin became a part of her daily routine, not as a powerful CEO, but as a man who understood her, valued her courage, and cared deeply for her happiness. And Armin, the once cold billionaire, learned something he had never experienced before. He learned that true strength did not come from money, power, or fear. It came from caring, trusting, and being vulnerable with someone who deserved it. The girl who had saved him one dark night had changed him in ways no business deal or fortune ever could. She had taught him warmth, honesty, and courage, the things money could never buy. In the quiet streets of the city, under the dim glow of streetlights and the gentle hum of life, their paths had crossed for a reason. A poor girl and a cold billionaire had touched each other's lives, and from that day on, neither would ever be the same. For Armin, life was no longer about power or fear. For Mira, life was no longer about struggle alone. Together, they had found trust, care, and a bond that neither wealth nor hardship could break. And under that soft, evening sky, with her hand in his, Mira knew one simple truth: sometimes, the most unexpected people can change your life forever.